Hi, this is present day Tyler. Before you listen to this episode, I just wanted to give you a little background on it. This episode 0 was originally recorded to be an intro to us, and it was the first thing we recorded back in September of 2021. We were still figuring out our setup, and there were a lot of audio issues. I initially decided not to edit and release it. However, my family had COVID the last week in February, which threw off our recording schedule since we record in person. We figured now would be a good opportunity to revisit episode 0 while we get back on track. Please forgive some of the audio issues and background noises that you may notice, as well as this feeling very much like a pilot episode. Enjoy. All right, welcome to episode 0 of the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. My name is Tyler.
I'm Kevin.
This is Tyson.
This will be an intro episode to introduce you to our group and to the members of the podcast team. We're also going to talk about the top 5 games that most influenced who we are as gamers. Our board game group consists of 6 people, and at least initially on this podcast, you're going to hear from 3 of us, Kevin, Tyson, and Tyler. Kevin and I and another member, Mark, started playing together a few years. It's been
probably been about 6 years.
6 years at your house, right?
Yeah, we started at my house.
Kevin started hosting game nights. It's kind of funny, at least 3 or 4 of us moved here all around the same time, about 2014-ish. And at some point Kevin started hosting games and we started playing at his house with his full library of games. And, over time we added a few more members. We got Kevin, Tyson, Tyler will be on this podcast. And then also Dan and Mark and Ben, and you'll hear their names come up from time to time, and hopefully we'll get them on the podcast at some point. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself and kind of your background with board gaming?
Yeah, sure. I've been playing, games all my life, but modern board games probably since 2007 is when I really started getting into it. So, I remember going into game shops and looking at all the games and got like Power Grid and Ticket to Ride and Catan and, games like that. So it really started in 07. A few years after that, I got a crazy idea that I wanted to start an online board game selling business for whatever reason. So I got into that. I got a website. I got an e-commerce site set up. I got set up with distributors, Alliance and AMC and Eagle Griffin and some of these other guys, and started selling games online, which was awesome. I loved it. It got really busy during the holidays, so I was shipping stuff like crazy. The UPS man was our best friend. He was coming to the house all the time, and there really was nothing better for me than getting a massive box of games. Even though they weren't mine, they were going to other people. It was just such a cool experience to get games shipped to my house and just to pick them up and feel them, and then sell a big stack of games to somebody that came to my house or to ship them off was really cool. I made some money, but really all the money went back into board games and grew my board game collection, which during that time, it really got pretty big. And at the same time, I was running a game group through meetup.com. So that was kind of a weird experience for me initially is, here's some strangers that are going to come to my house and play games. But through that experience, I made some, lifelong friends through gaming. And, I grew that game group to, I think there was 500 members in that game group. Not all of them came regularly. We had the regulars, but we would always get new members and new people that would come, and we really had a good time. So during that time also, I would contact publishers and request games to play. Got a lot of free games that way. I remember I talked to Zev at Z-Man quite a few times. He would say, yeah, I'll send you some games. He'd send me a big box of games. I got like a Agricola that way, Hansa Teutonica, like big games. Like Tales of the Arabian Nights, I remember came that way, which I think is going out of print, but
It's getting a new printing.
It's getting a new printing?
An upgraded one.
Oh, awesome. That game is great. If you haven't played, have you played that, Tyson?
Nope.
It's more an activity than a game, right? But it tells a cool story, right? So I mean, I got a bunch of free games, and during that time, my game collection really just kind of ballooned, skyrocketed. Got a lot of new games, which was cool, and it was just fun exploring the hobby. That's continued. Like Tyler mentioned, moved to Colorado about 7 years ago. An easy way for me to get to know people is to play games. So I started up a game group, sent it out to the people I knew, and it kind of grew from there. So like Tyler mentioned, he came, Mark came, and been playing games with these guys ever since. So it's a little bit of my background.
How about you, Tyson?
Similarly, I started playing games as a kid and just playing all the same types of games that Kevin was talking about. Grew up on the basics of Catan and Ticket to Ride and things like that. And I didn't play them a lot growing up, but I played them enough that I knew I wanted to play more of these. So then I went to college, and in college I started playing a lot of the Resistance and Risk and a bunch of other stuff with some friends, and just started really getting into it and started buying my own games. But I found that I didn't have a whole lot of people who were as invested in the hobby side of the gaming as I was. And so I started to play the games and have fun and try and invite a lot of people. In my graduate program, I played with a lot of people at lunch, and I would have like game days at lunch, and we would play King of Tokyo at lunch and a bunch of other smaller, quicker games, and really enjoyed that. And so I started buying a bunch of games and getting into it, but I would find that not enough people were playing the games with me. So then I was like, well, how can I start to get into this hobby without always buying the game? So I started demoing games for Envoy. Double exposure is what they're called, and they would send you free games so that you could get the games, and I wouldn't have to spend money on them and feel bad if I never played them. And then from there, I was like, well, I don't really want to demo these games all the time. So I started designing my own games, and I've designed somewhere between like 15 and 20 games of my own at this point. None of them have been published, but I did find the need to have playtesters. So I started up a playtesting service and actually spent 2 years playtesting people's games and getting out and doing a YouTube channel of that, where we would just playtest their games, and we would spend time figuring out why the games did and didn't work, and we would discuss them with the designers specifically, but put those on YouTube for whoever wanted to watch. Nobody really cares to watch games that haven't been published yet, so we didn't get a lot of views. But then I stopped doing that and decided I want to do some more stuff, so I ended up publishing a game with Pangea Games, who I made a friend with in that process, called Tasty Humans, and we published this game. The designer was actually from Colorado as well. I met him by hosting a contest, and we ended up publishing his game. And then I was like, well, I want to do some more of this. And so I started working with other publishers. I've worked with like Game Brewer, some with Button Shy. I've worked with Pangea Games, Munchie Games. I'm working right now with a company called Jinx Studio. And I just help market and kickstart board games for the most part. And I really enjoy that. I like Kevin, I loved having a large shipment of games arrive at my house, and then I send them off to somebody else, reviewers usually, to look through the games and play them. But I'll do my best in this podcast not to unduly influence people with the games that I work on. But yeah, so I started doing a lot of that and loved it. I joined this group of gamers about 2 years ago when I moved in and bought a house in the neighborhood, and haven't looked back. This has been one of the best. No, this has been the best board gaming group experience I've had. And so now I figured, well, if Tyler wants to start up a podcast, well, I'm going to hop on board.
Heck yeah. All right. So my name's Tyler. I grew up playing board games as well. I had older siblings who got married and went off to college. And some of my favorite memories were when they would come home for the holidays and we would sit around playing card games or board games until, 2 or 3 in the morning. I played lots of sports as a kid, but I was also super nerdy and loved playing my board games growing up. I kind of had a couple of resurgencies in the board gaming world. Like I served in the military, and so my wife and I were moving around quite a bit, and we met a lot of friends who we started small gaming groups with, and that mostly consisted of playing some card games, but then also playing Carcassonne and Settlers of Catan and Killer Bunnies.
That's a terrible game.
I thought you liked randomness in games.
Oh, I know. Right.
So anyway, I kind of went through a resurgence there with board gaming and started to get into some of the hobby games at that point. My wife and I, we were newly married and couldn't afford a lot, but I do remember when we were living in California, we would go on a date once a month at least, and we would go to the next town over that had a theater, an Arby's, and a Toys R Us. So we'd go see a movie, we'd get Arby's for dinner, then we would go to Toys R Us and go buy a new game. And then we'd go home and play it, and that was an awesome experience. And we had that tradition for a year and a half while we were in Monterey. Loved doing that and loved playing those games and building our collection. We moved to Colorado eventually and started playing at Kevin's house. And I mean, it got to the point where it's like, that game was amazing. I'm going to go buy it now. And, there's been some missteps along the way, but
For the most part, I
most
recommended
part.
some pretty good games,
and
right?
it was an awesome experience to, hang out with other guys and play some board games and just have fun. And I never felt like there's been any, super awkward moments or, some people can get pretty intense about losing a board game, and we haven't had any table flipping or anything, but it's always been fun experiences, starting with your gaming group and then kind of creating our own gaming group. And, now we host bigger game nights with
Lots of people and try and spread the hobby a little bit more. And we have a great time. And like Tyson, I don't think that there's been a better group that I've played with. Love being a part of it. And we have great discussions after we play games and on our game nights. And, we have fun talking about the games and talking about strategies and things that happened and laughing and teasing each other and having a good time. So we just thought, what the heck? Let's do a podcast. If people listen to us, awesome. If they don't, who cares? We're going to have fun. So
Hopefully people listen.
I mean, yeah,
You never know.
We'll see, right?
But if they don't, like you said, we're having a good time.
We'll test out Tyson's marketing skills and see how well he can sell a box of awesomeness.
Yeah, well, I can sell the board games because they're good. Whether or not we're good is yet to be decided.
We'll figure that out.
This is true. But,
and we're going to have some growing pains with this, and we're going to try and find our niche. And we want to talk about our goals, and our goals for this podcast are, one, obviously, is to have fun. We love board gaming, and we hope to share that fun with you. Hopefully this is an excuse for us to go to more board gaming events and cons. And we also would like to bring new people to the hobby and expose people who are already in the hobby to new games that they come to love. Overall, we just want to have a good time.
Our top 5 list this week is going to be the top 5 games that most influenced who we are as gamers. To start, I think Tyler's got the first game on the list.
All right, so I don't know if we said we could only list one game per slot, so I'm going to go ahead and break that rule.
I cheated as well, so I think you're fine.
Okay, all right. Well, number 5, Stratego and Feudal. We all know the classic game of Stratego. As a child, I had notebooks full of my Stratego layouts ready to go. That was one of my favorite games as a kid, and I'm pretty sure I never lost. Feudal is a 3M board game, and it was a lot like chess. You had pieces that moved in different patterns, and my brother and I totally house ruled it. We added dice. Each character had its own 12-sided dice or 8-sided dice. We added all the Dungeons and Dragons dice in and made the characters more interesting. So those were my number 5, Stratego and Feudal.
I love house rules.
I understand where your love of house rules came from.
Yes.
It is right there.
Right.
Hey,
and for the record, I hate house rules.
I mean, designers back then were struggling a little bit. I mean, that was like I don't know if it was a 70s game, but they needed some help, so we took the game to the next level.
So question on Stratego. Did you like it only because you never lost?
No,
No?
The whole
thing, right?
The whole thing was great. I mean, I loved setting up your board. You're setting up your army. I'd always put the 1 in the middle somewhere, or 1 off to the side, the 2 on the other side with the spy behind him, protecting him against the 1.
Right,
and the
right.
3s kind of balanced somewhere on each side. And, I just had various diagrams drawn up of my bomb layouts and where the flag was. There was a lot of...
Sounds like you've played it recently, is what I'm hearing.
yes.
There is nothing more satisfying than having the opponent hit one of your bombs.
Yes,
That
yes.
is
Especially when it's a 1 and they're like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
"Oh, you're
I
an
only
idiot for
played-
going too far with your 1."
I only ever played the Star Wars Stratego,
Oh, nice.
and it had all the Star Wars characters from episode 1 to episode 6. So I liked that one, but I never actually got to play plain vanilla Stratego.
All right. Well, my number 5, like I said, I broke the rules as well, and maybe even more than Tyler, because I picked just a standard deck of playing cards, which as a kid we would play all the time, right? So I remember playing with my mom. We'd play gin rummy. We would play hearts and spades and solitaire if there was nobody else around. But I think those experiences when I was a younger kid kind of gave me the competitive vibe, right? It made me enjoy games and the competitive aspect of games and the social aspect of games, being with family. We would go on camping trips all the time, and we would get in the tent and throw down the cards and start playing. And it's a good memory and something that kind of kicked me off down the gaming route.
It's awesome.
Good times.
Did you ever play solitaire?
I did play solitaire.
All the time.
Many different versions of like the pyramid
Spider,
one,
and
spider
yeah.
solitaire.
I've spent probably hundreds of hours playing just plain vanilla solitaire on the computer, and that shows how popular and well received at school I was, because I would rather play solitaire than go hang out with friends sometimes. So,
Nerd alert.
so I like a standard deck of cards as well.
Nice. I always loved, family would come home and we would play hand and foot around the island in our kitchen. And that was awesome. I loved that. That was, for hours laughing and shouting and yelling at each other and slamming cards down. And it was awesome.
We did the same type of thing. And like I had a big family. And so my family was always doing we would have a bucket full of standard decks of cards and just do Speed. We'd play California Speed. We'd do it was called in our family Egyptian Rat Screw. There's a lot of different names for that one. A Dutch Blitz style game. There was also Spoons. That was a popular one. We used to do all of these variations on standard decks of cards, and yeah.
And then there's the classic War, right? Which has exactly 0 choices to make in the game. Do you guys play that one?
I guess it does, right?
Right. You just play a card, and whoever has the higher card
Yeah,
wins.
you could simulate that whole thing. Yeah.
But War has actually made its way into modern board games as well.
That mechanism,
right?
right?
It is discussed as in a design space as options. But yeah.
All right, so that's my number 5, standard deck of cards.
So I think my number 5 seems to drift a little bit from this standard of early on gaming. And I went straight into a game that introduced me into the hobby. So number 5 for me was a Game of Thrones, the board game. and I'm talking about the 2003 first edition that came out. I probably played that first in like 2007. And my best friend in high school brought it over and taught it to me. And I just remember thinking, this is a lot of rules, and I would hate to have to be the one to read the rule books. Lo and behold, I'm one of the ones who commonly read rule books now. But I remember just seeing that and thinking, this is a huge game, and this is crazy that they make games like this. I, in fact, didn't even know anything about a Game of Thrones, and this is well before the HBO series that we were playing it. But the George R.R. Martin books, my brother and my best friend had read them and were really into them. And so I just got into it knowing the mechanism and not knowing the IP at all behind it. And I remember playing that game and just thinking, this is exciting. The conflict that you go back and forth with to be able to play with each other, and just kind of that head-to-head mind game type of element I really loved about it, because it allowed me to mess with people and manipulate people in a format that was socially acceptable. So I liked that a lot.
You do like messing with people.
I do, and you'll see a pattern, I think, on some of the games that I've chosen in my top 5 as being that. So
I've played most of a Game of Thrones. It's one of the few games that I've started and haven't actually finished it. So we were at a game shop in Salt Lake called Demolition Games, and there was a player that we were playing with, and she was probably the slowest player that I have ever played with, even slower than us.
it sounds like she belongs on this podcast.
Right. It should be on this podcast, right? But she could have even outdone us for how slow she was. So we were like probably maybe 4.5 hours into the game, and there was still maybe a third of the game to go, and the store closed. so we just had to leave. But I do remember enjoying the game and enjoying the mechanisms in the game. But it's a game I'd like to revisit and go back and play.
Oh, I'd absolutely play that again. I think it stands like it's as in terms of board game age, it's the hobby board game age. It's an older game now, but it's not as old as Stratego or Feudal or a standard deck of cards.
Right? Yeah.
Is it in your game library?
No, I always had friends who had it, and I didn't. I should go get the updated version, because they did a second edition that is it definitely improved on the artwork and everything else of the game. So,
and like most second editions, probably streamlined the rule set a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you could go back and play with that girl at Demolition Games.
I mean, if only I could find where she's at. I don't even know who it was.
So that was my number 5, A Game of Thrones, the board game.
All right, so my number 4 is Carcassonne. This came out in 2000. However, I did not start playing it until about 2006. And I was just blown away by the strategy in it. You know, I don't know that it's aged as well as some games, but I still love it. And this was also when my FOMO, my fear of missing out, started for expansions, because I hoarded Carcassonne expansions back then. And I still enjoy Carcassonne. And along with, I would say, Settlers of Catan brought me back into the hobby, or exposed me to a much wider hobby, I would say.
It's dangerous to go down the expansion route in Carcassonne. I don't know what the number is at this point, but it's got to be like in the 20 or 30s.
It's got to be one of the ones with the most expansions out there for any game. I mean, it's an evergreen title that's never going away.
And a lot of them are just little mini ones.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 tile, or just a little thing of tiles or whatever.
Really, you just need inns and traders and
inns
and cathedrals.
You can
and
get
traders and builders.
You can get inns and traders too. I heard that one's pretty good.
Oh yeah.
See, I've never played any of the expansions until I started playing with you guys. And,
you haven't?
And I've only ever played vanilla Carcassonne. No, I'll take that back. I had the river expansion included in my version, so I've played with the river.
I think.
But
you got to start off.
It forms your map. Yeah, I agree. But I've never played anything else, because when I played Carcassonne, I almost immediately after that played Isle of Skye, which for me completely replaced Carcassonne. I would always play Isle of Skye over Carcassonne. Now, Carcassonne I don't think can be replaced, because
it's a classic.
It's a classic, and you can literally play Carcassonne with almost anybody, and it's really accessible that way. I don't think Isle of Sky has that degree of accessibility.
Yeah.
One thing about Carcassonne, we recently been playing it on BGA and or Board Game Arena, and I forgot how cutthroat that game can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
If you're playing with the right group or the wrong group, it can be really cutthroat.
Yeah,
which
Kevin.
I enjoy about the game, but it could turn some people off.
Similarly, when we were playing the other day, I was like, "Oh, that's why my wife doesn't like to play this anymore with me."
Yeah, if the Princess and the Dragon is in there, then definitely my wife will not play.
Yeah, it takes it up the next level. I mean, so really, you can't play Carcassonne. I don't want to play Carcassonne without inns and cathedrals and traders and builders at the very least. Beyond that, I'm not sure that many of the expansions are worth adding in more than once or twice. So that's number 4 for me, Carcassonne.
All right. Well, my number 4 is a game called Ingenious by a little-known designer called Rainer Knizia.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him? Okay. Well, he's done a few games.
Never heard of the game.
700 somewhere around there?
Yeah, right. You never heard of the game?
Nope.
All right. Well, little background. It was, I don't know, I think it was 2007. May have been 2008, but my wife and I were out getting some dinner, and we noticed a game shop next to the place we were getting dinner at in this strip mall called Game Crossing. So we walk into that shop, and I'd never really been into a hobby game shop before. And compared to today's standards, there weren't a lot of games, right? But for then, I was like, holy cow, there's all these games, and I've never heard of any of them. What the heck is this place? So we go in and talk to the owner, and he was nice enough to sit down and show us a few games. So one of them was Ingenious, the other one was Blockus. So my wife and I were like, this is great. So we picked up both of them and went home and played both of those games quite a bit. But the one that made the biggest impact on me was Ingenious. And the reason for that is the scoring mechanism of that game was unique to anything I'd ever seen before. So you had to advance these cubes along a track, and you scored for the lowest cube on that track. So whoever advanced all of their cubes the furthest was the winner, right? And I'd never seen anything like that before. It wasn't like a normal game where you're just going around the game, seeing however many points you can get, and if you get the most points, you're the winner. So it kind of opened my eyes to a different way to think about games, and a different way, that designers work things into games that are interesting, not just Monopoly or not just the games that maybe we grew up with, So that was one of the games that kind of kickstarted me into these modern board games.
I've never played it, though I've seen it. I think it's at Barnes & Noble pretty regularly. It's one of the first games, I think, before Barnes & Noble started getting a lot of their hobby board games in there. I remember seeing Ingenious on the shelf, and I remember considering it a number of times, but never ended up picking it up.
Yeah, and the fact that it's still around is kind of a testament of the quality of the game. I mean, it's very abstract. There's no theme at all.
Is that surprising with Rainer Knizia?
For Rainer Knizia, right, yeah. That's pretty par for the course for him, but it's just really well done, right? It scales well to multiple players. The board becomes a little bit smaller as there's fewer players, which was interesting for me to see, back then. So it's good. It's a great game.
You see that mechanic too of the scoring for the lower track or wherever you are on the lower track, right? Show up in some games. I think Crown of Amara has that. Is there
Between Two Cities from Stonemaier has that, which was the first game I played with that mechanic, and I liked that.
Right, and Rainer Knizia has done so many games. There's all kinds of designers that I think are picking some of the mechanics that maybe he was initially the one who came up with it. Yeah. I don't know that.
He's got to be the author of at least a few mechanics. But at this point, him and Richard Garfield maybe are some foundational fathers of the hobby design sphere.
For sure.
Well, and Sid Meier, but.
Yeah. So that's my number 4, Ingenious.
My number 4 is Betrayal at House on the Hill. I'm not talking about like the 1989 Avalon Hill version of it, because I never played any version of it until the 2004 version. I know they've reprinted it a number of times since then as well. But this was also a game that was introduced to me by the same friend who introduced A Game of Thrones to me. And so it was right around that same time of me kind of entering the hobby board gaming sphere, and playing these more meaty games that I hadn't been exposed to up until that point. I, as a gamer in general, do not like cooperative games. Now, that's not always fair,
I've seen that a little bit.
but I'd say, like, as far as, like, I'd consider games as pure cooperative, like Pandemic, right? Pandemic is a pure cooperative game, but something like Gloomhaven is a dungeon crawl. I would classify that more in a dungeon crawl than a cooperative style game. So this was like the first kind of foray for me into kind of the cooperative sphere, in that I enjoyed it. But again, hailing back to A Game of Thrones and kind of the manipulating players and things like that, there is the betrayer mechanic in Betrayal that I just thought was, oh, this is phenomenal. Because I don't know if I'm going to be the betrayer or not, but I have to set myself up as if I were going to betray these people at some point. And that was super exciting and novel to me, to be able to play a game and be like, okay, here we go, step by step. I need to accomplish the goal, but my goal could immediately change at any given point, and then I have to make sure that I'm prepped and ready for that. So I loved the whole idea of Betrayal at House on the Hill. I haven't played it for years. I used to play it for every like Halloween season and things like that. And I actually recently traded my copy away to get a copy of Lisboa, which I thought was a good upgrade. But I'm thinking I shouldn't have traded this one away, or at least I should get another copy soon, because my wife was very upset when I traded this game. This is one of the very few games that my wife will play with me, so I should probably get this one back.
Yeah, I've played a Betrayal. I actually own Betrayal. And unfortunately, when they did the reprint, there was major production issues with it. So I got it, and all of the tiles were warped, and you'd put the clips on to track everything.
And they tear
would
stuff.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't even tear stuff. They just fall off.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't stick on at all. And it was unplayable because of the production issues. So I got new tiles, and after I got new tiles, it was a lot better. I think they've long since fixed those issues. But
I think they have now those extra like special trackers that you can buy separately. And if I picked this one back up, I would get those extra product to be able to improve that. It's not the greatest game out there, but as for my development as a gamer, this was a game that just shaped me.
Thematically, it's great.
Yeah.
You're exploring a haunted house. Who doesn't want to do that, right?
Have you played the other versions, like the Baldur's Gate or the Scooby-Doo?
I haven't. I've wanted to, but I have never played either of those.
Okay. So I the first copy I ever played, it wasn't mine, but it was the version that was crappy quality, and it, we had a good experience playing it, but we eventually got our own version, and it was a little bit nicer. As far as Betrayal, the versions, my favorite is definitely Baldur's Gate, just because of the theme. I think that one is by far the most fun one, but
I don't think I'll ever pick up Baldur's Gate, only because, like I said, my wife will play this game with me, so I have to go with the crappy version. And at the time when I purchased this version, it was one of my first games that I ever purchased on my own, so I had no issue with the production because I had no expectation otherwise. This was like, oh, this is great. Look at these clips; they're great. They fit on there. Oh no, they just fell off, but I'll fix that. Like I didn't have a lot of issues with that.
nice.
So that was my number 4, Betrayal at House on the Hill.
All right, my number 3 is Stone Age. This was a game that I played for the first time at Kevin's house when this group was just in its infancy. Kevin had a game night going on. I was just completely blown away by the, placing your workers, bringing back resources, buying these cards that would give you multiplied scores at the end of the game. And, I'm behind now, but I've got a handful of cards that's going to catch me up. Just all the action selections that were available, I was just blown away by it. And now I go back and play Stone Age, and it's like, wow, this is pretty simple. This is when I went kind of crazy. I was like, this is awesome. I'm buying every game that I ever play at Kevin's house. And how disappointed I've been with a few of those purchases after the fact,
how
and
much
I've
did you
I've had to rein it in a little bit. That I can't just buy everything after my first experience of playing at your house. But for a while, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, how much? You spent quite a bit on Witch's Brew, right?
I did. I'm pretty sure that was eBay for about $80, which
Well, that's not terrible.
not too bad, right? It's
Yeah,
not as much
right.
as I paid for Carcassonne or some of the other ones that are still on my shelf unplayed. But
Well, I mean, and how could you ever doubt Kevin when he was the influence for you purchasing Monster Crunch, which
well, that came
Oh,
later.
the first reference of Monster Crunch in the podcast. All right, okay.
So, I mean, really, that was the first point where I was like, okay, I can't just trust everything that Kevin recommends.
The hate for Monster Crunch. I just don't get it.
I'll point it out that I've never played it, so I have no idea what we're
so
doing.
you're just the instigator, right?
It's,
Okay.
it's
right.
got like one more choice than playing War does.
Whatever.
So
I
one
mean,
choice.
it's the nostalgia, right? You get, Frankenberry, right? Booberry.
Yeah,
I mean,
total.
you
But
get-
there's really no game there. Though.
Yeah, I bought my kids a box of fruit snacks the other day that has all of those characters on it.
I
and
saw
the-
those at Sam's this morning.
Guys
Yeah.
are jerks. This
And
game
that's about
is
the
fine,
extent
okay?
of the nostalgia that I need from that.
I mean, shortly after it was Reef, I bought, and I was like, okay, this is an okay game. That was another played at Kevin's. Had a
Right.
great time at the game night. Bought Reef right away. Hasn't really gotten to the table. Don't think it really will ever again. But it wasn't until Monster Crunch that it was like
That
okay.
you started doubting my judgment, right?
a little bit,
A little bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the first.
In
time.
my defense, I have introduced some quality games.
You-
to the group.
absolutely.
Is
As he's pointing out, Stone Age,
being
right?
one of
Yeah.
them. Right.
Yes,
Okay,
my
got
number
it,
4
got it.
Stone Age,
3.
which fueled my second resurgence, rebirth, whatever it's called, into board gaming.
It fueled this wall of games that we're recording next to.
Yes.
I've never played an actual game of Stone Age, and I don't even count the game
You
that
haven't
we've played on Board Game Arena because I was literally just pushing buttons that whole time because I never read the rules. But I will say that I felt like by the end of that game on Board Game Arena, it was a very intuitive game. So like you can figure that out pretty easily, and it's still got a lot of interesting choices there to be made, and it impressed me at how simple and easily understandable things are in that game. In that, here's what you do, and you need to have food, or in this case, you could have stone or gold or whatever to feed
You can eat your
people,
resources,
right? But I thought it was really nice to have such a refined design that literally I didn't read any rules. And by the end of the game, I think I came in second or third in that game without knowing it at all how to play the game. So
You're good at just pushing buttons.
yeah,
All right.
and your buttons to boot. So
Yeah, well, there you go.
It is fun when you get to feed your people gold. I mean,
It hurts a little bit because gold is a
So-
valuable resource in that
and
game,
so
right?
much, and more difficult to get than any of the other resources, right? But,
Right. But it is kind of fun.
but
They're
like,
eating good
your,
that night, right?
cavemen can say that they've tasted gold. It's
Right.
pretty awesome.
Can digest a variety of substances. All right. Well, my number 3 is Catan. I think at this point, if you know anything about games, you've probably heard of Catan or Settlers of Catan. I don't know when the name officially switched over just to Catan, but
I don't like to think that it did. I
You
feel
think
like,
it's Settlers
I feel
of
like
Catan?
that's a little bit of a betrayal to fans of the game.
I kind of feel that way. Back when I played, it was Settlers of Catan. And this was the first game that I had other people over to my house regularly to play a game. And we had friends over all the time. We got the 5 to 6 player expansion. We, delved into the Seafarers of Catan expansion, and which is my favorite, by the way, because the one where you're discovering, tiles and flipping over tiles. I just thought that was awesome. But it really got me into inviting people over to my house and enjoying time with friends around a fun game, right? And I don't play Catan much anymore. I actually played it not too long ago, and it was not great. I don't think it's aged well, at least for me and my gaming tastes. But at that time, it was fantastic. And like I said, being there with friends and hanging out with friends and eating food and just having a good time, the start of that has really led to regular game nights for the last 10, 12 years for me. So
That's awesome.
it was a great start to the game nights for sure.
I think you're right in saying that it's probably one that if you know of any hobby style board games, you know of Settlers of Catan or Catan, right? I can't tell you how many times when either my wife or myself say, I like board games to somebody introducing at a party or a social situation, and they go, oh yeah, have you ever played Settlers of Catan or Catan? Right? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And then the follow-up question is commonly, but have you played with the Cities and Knights expansion?
Oh, Cities and Knights is another one.
And I have played with that expansion, and I do think that, like you said, I don't know that for me, Settlers of Catan has aged as well, the base game, but I'd still play with the Cities and Knights expansion because I think it adds a little bit more of choices and decision and experience in there that is more in line with my gaming taste now. And I'm glad to see so many people recognize that game because it means that it's such an easier segue to bring somebody into the hobby than when somebody says, oh, so like Monopoly, which, I mean, I played Monopoly enough. It's not on my list here, but I played Monopoly enough to appreciate what Monopoly is and what it's done for board games. But it's so much easier to make that extension of, hey, you want to try a game? If their comparison is from Catan as opposed to something like Monopoly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I loved playing Cities and Knights. I loved that it added the extra commodities versus just the basic resources. And then I also loved Seafarers, which I think that was probably the first game where I played, first hobby game I played where it had different scenarios and maps kind of set up for you to go explore. And that was always awesome. I loved, the variability that was there. Hey, we're playing Seafarers. Well, how are we going to set up the map this time? Oh, we already got the layout for it. Cool. Let's select this one. And it was awesome. It was a good game.
So yeah, my number 3, Catan.
My number 3 is, so I feel like I did this slightly backwards compared to you guys, where you took the more less hobby games and put them on the 5 and the 3, and I went and I put my less hobby game right here in 3 because I think it shaped me more as a gamer than some of those other games did. This was probably the first game I was ever given, and it was a game that introduced me to the fact that you could play games with people. It was one of the first games I ever remember from an adopted grandmother. The game is called Set, and Set is a game for 1 to 20 players is what it's listed as. And looking back at it now, it is like something you would see in a psychology test. Like you'd administer this to see what do people see and how did their spatial reasoning work and things like that. But basically the game is there are a bunch of shapes as cards, and you set up a grid of 9 cards with different shapes on them. You've got diamonds and ovals and squigglies and whatever else. Some of those are solid shapes, some of them are empty shapes, and some of them are have lines in them. So they're partially filled shapes. And the whole idea of this game is you're trying to create sets. And a set can be 3 cards of the same type, so all the same shape, all the same color, or all completely different, or or they have to be different in all those different variations. So the game is a game about speed, which now for me and my processing ability is not something that I'm very good at. But when I was 6 or 7 years old, when I got gifted this game, I could see those shapes and I could make those connections so fast and be like, oh, there it is. And I really enjoyed it. and it was a game that I could play with anybody. But really, for me, this game, it was given to me right around the time that my mom had gotten sick. And my mom, when I was a kid, died of cancer. And so she'd gotten sick, and I'd gotten this card game, and I could play this with her, and while she lay in bed, and it was a great experience for me to be able to connect with people. And it wasn't just her, it was this adopted grandmother of mine as well, who continued to watch us after she passed away. It was just a game that actually increased my relationships with other people that I just found extremely valuable. So I credit Set as being probably one of the most influential games that I've had, because it set me on the path of wanting to play games in the first place. Have either of you ever heard of or played Set?
Well, we have it, and I don't like it at all. well, and it's for the reason that you said, later, that I think as I get older, I get slower. And I can't, and I always play it with my 14-year-old daughter. Just loves the game, and she picks up on it so fast. She sees those sets, and I'm just sitting there scratching my head, and she has this pile of cards, but at the end of the game, and I have nothing, So the only reason I say I don't like it is because I'm terrible at it and I suck at it, right? But I think it's a it's a good game for sure.
That's pretty much how I feel. I was always terrible at it. Even as a kid, we had it growing up. I think it's a Mensa Select game. I could be wrong, but
I could believe you on that.
I mean, we'll go with that.
Yeah. I'm not giving out $5 gift cards to Miniature Market or anything if I'm wrong, but don't quote me on that. But I believe it's a Mensa Select game. But no, that's a powerful memory, and for you, especially with the hardship that you were going through at that time in your life, and thanks for sharing that with us.
I totally agree with Kevin that it's not a game that I necessarily want to play anymore. It's more about what the game did for me, which is why it's my number 3 Set.
All right, so my number 2 is Clans of Caledonia, and this game, I remember the first time I played it, I was just completely blown away by it. And specifically the market action, or the market mechanic, buying and selling your resources. They go up and down in cost. It's kind of funny because we were playing a little bit later with someone else, and they're like, you guys are playing that wrong. It was Dan. He was like, you can't buy and sell the same resource in the same round. And that totally
trading,
right? No high-speed trading, which I was a master at that.
Oh, yeah, you did that all the time. Eking out one extra coin. Right?
Yeah, to be able to do the next action that I wanted to do, or placement or building of, deploying my buildings or sheep or cows. But no, Clans of Caledonia, this game, I could play this game nonstop. Just an amazing game. I would say it was my number 1 game for a couple of years. It's been dethroned recently by Teotihuacan.
Yeah.
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan.
I'm going to say it multiple ways, and then we'll go with one
and
of
probably
those.
Still be wrong.
Yes. But no, Clans of Caledonia, I remember the first time we played this, Kevin, with Mark. Yep. We played, and it was probably a 3 or 3.5 hour game, and we were all just kind of blown away by it. And then we played
the following day. We played again.
Yep. And I think my family might have been out of town, and then we snuck in 2 games in one night shortly thereafter. And and then I think the day after that we played again. Wasn't it like a 3-day thing? Yeah.
We played 5 or 6 times that first week.
Yeah.
We just all loved it.
Yeah. It's definitely in my top 5 of all time, and just, I love everything about it. If there's one criticism I have about it, it's that the components, or at least the map, the boards are a little small. It could have been blown up a little bit, but
yeah, that design decision was weird to me, because it is teeny. It's just
it is tiny.
Like you can't see that board very well.
If I remember correctly, it won. There's an award, something else.
It won some contest, right?
Yeah, it was a design contest that actually allowed it to be published, and it's a European, there's a bunch of different publishers in Europe that collectively look at games and then go through it. So if I remember correctly, that's the case on Clans. It was his first published design, and it was picked up and won this overall contest because it was so impressive.
Yeah. It was awesome.
My only criticism of the game, other than the board size, is that there's no expansion yet.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. Because like you said, it's just a wonderfully designed game, and it's just so much fun to play every time with the different factions, the starting abilities, and how to maximize your unique ability throughout the game. It's just a fun puzzle to figure out.
Yep. And I love, the other players finish taking their actions during a round, and there's nothing better than when you've still got like 40 money to spend, and you reel off 4 or 5 more actions, and everybody else is kind of sitting there just watching you, like giving you dirty glares. And, right. And you're tearing it up, right?
I wouldn't know about the dirty glare part because this is, again, one of those games that I've only ever played on Board Game Arena, because apparently coming into this group as the newest one to this gaming group, which I've been here for about 2 years now, but I mean, I didn't get these earlier experiences that you all had and get to play this game over and over again. So I've been able to be introduced to it from you guys through Board Game Arena, and I like it. But it's one I need to play on the table.
It benefits to get on the table.
It benefits multiple plays, for sure. If you're a newbie going in, not knowing what you're doing, there's no mercy in our group, I guess.
Nope. That's a general rule of thumb, I think.
Yeah, right.
All right. So that's my number 2, Clans of Caledonia.
My number 2 is Shadows over Camelot. So Shadows over Camelot, I've had for a long time. It was, I think, the first cooperative game that I played. I played it right before Pandemic came out, and I played Pandemic. I played that a ton when that first came out, but this was right before that we played it. It was one of the first really kind of nerdy games that I bought that had these little miniatures that you put out on the board. And I remember going to friends' houses and I'm like, what the heck is this? Miniatures, like around the Knights of the Round Table. This is nerdy. But
and now look at you.
Now look at me, right? I've got Ankh, and that's whoa. That takes it up a few levels. But what I really liked about the game, and still like about the game, is it had the trader mechanic in there. And if you play with enough players, you can have 2 traders, which is really crazy. And just, accusing people and trying to figure out who that trader is and being completely wrong about who it is, and then have something, come in and completely sideswipe you. We had a recent play of it with our group where Ben was the trader, and he did a pretty good job.
He was amazing.
He was, hiding it. We ended up giving him a bunch of cards to start off so we could go, fight the Black Knight. And
he blindsided us, all of us, and as being the trader.
Well, and he doesn't normally like conflict, so I think he was able to go under the radar a little bit because of that. Of previous plays and other games, we'll play Scythe and he'll avoid attacking the whole game, right? So,
but I was sitting next to him this whole time, and I was so convinced that he wasn't the traitor, which upsets me because usually that's stuff that I love to pick up on. But I was so convinced he wasn't the traitor that I'm sitting here confiding in him and telling him stuff, and I'm thinking, thinking it's Kevin, and I'm like, oh, it's Kevin. Kevin's the worst.
No, Mark was the.
We were all piling on Mark, right?
Yeah.
I mean. And he's like, no, I'm not. Like, oh, sure.
Oh, no,
Mark,
it was
sure.
Dan, because Dan was going around anyway.
We probably accused
everybody but Ben.
Right?
Yeah.
But he came out as the traitor, and it was just such a cool moment in that game, right? And Ben he should have been, right? He was super proud of himself for playing that well, right? And it was a cool experience, right? And that's a recent experience, but I had those experiences before when I first started playing the game. And like the other games on this list, it kind of opened my eyes to different mechanisms in games, specifically that mechanism of the trader, and how it can be just such a fun experience. And a lot of games like that are experiences, right? It's more than the game itself, and that's kind of how I feel about that one.
Apparently, you guys both really like games where you can backstab people.
Oh, I do.
I'm a little surprised Nemesis isn't on this list. Open the evac chamber and let space suck out.
To be fair, I
Throw a
haven't
Molotov
played it
cocktail
enough
down
to
the
know.
hallway.
Oh yeah. Kevin Molotov cocktailed me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't even the traitor.
No, but I think I had to kill somebody for
It wasn't me,
my
was it?
objective.
No, but it was
didn't matter who
hilarious
it was.
regardless.
Yeah, I was like, what?
And I'm like, well, why not Tyler?
Yeah.
Shadows over Camelot that was the first experience that I ever had with it. It was the experience we were just talking about, and that's the first time I played. I suspect that if I had been introduced to this one early on in my hobby gaming experience, this would have been a staple one for me. I don't know that it's one that I'll come back to a ton of times now.
Especially because it's out of print.
Especially because it's like worth $1 million or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
But
Nope.
Beyond that, I just don't think that for me it's what I'm looking for in a gaming experience anymore. But I can totally see how this shapes a gamer. Like this game is like a foundational game that if you're coming into the hobby and you play this style of game, it'll definitely have those experiences that you're talking about. And I think that's one of the best things for me about my early hobby board gaming experiences was that it created experiences that you could have conversations like these about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm excited to play this one. So we're doing a board game retreat in a little over a month. And, there's 6 people in our group that are going, and we aren't going to all play 6-player games the whole time, but we talked about this as being one of the games that we're going to play together. And I can't wait. The experience of trying to figure out who the traitor is just awesome. And, the accusing comments and looks and just, I don't know. We had a great time playing this last time. This game, I think at a lower player count, you don't get quite that same experience, but
For sure.
But definitely with 5 or 6 people, I mean, this game's awesome.
Yep, I agree. So that's on my number 2, Shadows over Camelot.
My number 2 is a game that I put on this list because, again, it has a personal connection for me. It's Risk. Risk, most people who have played hobby games have probably played Risk or at least have some exposure to what Risk is, right? And I put this one as my number 2 for a couple of reasons. One, this was one of the first games, bigger style games that I ever saw played. I remember going to Thanksgiving one year at some cousins, and all of my older cousins, and I was like one of the youngest cousins, so they didn't invite me, but all of my older cousins had set up a game of Risk and started playing before dinner, and were playing this big epic game. And then we went and had dinner, and they came back and played it. And I just remember like being high enough to see the components on the table and looking around and watching them play this game and just thinking, that looks fantastic. Why can't I play? Like, I want to play this game. Look, they're little dudes. They're fighting each other, doing a lot of things that are amazing. And so, yeah, it was this experience that I saw that there was this world of people who could play multiple hour-long games and like have like this tactical and strategic experience that was just really amazing. I didn't get to play this game for a number of years until later after that. And then in college, this was a game that we played almost nightly. And when I lived in a house with a bunch of different guys, we ended up playing this game over and over and over again. And I loved that there is an ability to kind of betray people in this game as well. There's the ability to kind of make deals and create alliances and then go and be like, I'm not going to do that. This was one of the first games that I realized that this is a game, right? And what I mean by that is when I play board games, all bets are off. Like, I'm going to pull at your emotions. I'm going to do everything I can to manipulate you if that is within the realm of that game. And
talk right before it's your turn.
No matter
I like how you picked up on that during what was it, Vindication?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm gonna.
The last few games that we've played with Tyson at the table, I mean,
that's just coincidental.
It'll be.
Oh, sure it is.
He was doing it the other night when we played Praga. I was sitting there, and it was about my turn. I'm watching what Kevin's doing, and Tyson's telling me about I don't know what, but it was
something very important, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
it's the meta within the game,
and it's gotten to the point where I don't even feel bad not listening to Tyson. mid game when he's telling me something that he wants to share with me or whatever, or he's talking about the game or something's going on or something in life or I don't know, but I just tune it out a little bit now.
You got to learn to ignore Tyson. That's
a little bit, yeah. I mean,
now I will play...
after I take my turn. Fine, great, let's talk. But
yeah, but then it's usually my turn because I'm right after you.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
I think that this that type of thing was very important to me to realize that a game can be a game and it doesn't have to go beyond that. So I can do things and say things and be a person in a game that is different, so long as the game allows me to do that. Like there are games that if it's not in the rules, I don't like. I hate cheating whatsoever. If anybody ever cheats, it like really that type of emotion is where that will go beyond the game, right? But like if it's within the confines of the game cheating, like you can betray somebody, or like I'm thinking of bang the card game, or like any of those style of games where you're encouraged to lie to people. Like I love that.
Those types.
Sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah. Still never played that one.
That's rough.
So Risk for me was kind of an exposure to that in a way that I hadn't had. But then on top of that, it's a high conflict game, and I love conflict in my games. If that's what they're meant to do. Yep. Like there are games that inject conflict that I don't feel is appropriate for a game, and I'm sure we'll talk about different games like that at some point. But for me, the goal of Risk is to fight and hurt and harm people and like, or at least dominate, right? And you're trying to. So I liked it. Created in me a style of gamer that like was not aversive to conflict style games, and I like conflict, but I also really, really like Euro style games that are low conflict games most of the time. But this was a game that kind of shaped me in that regard.
I always loved at the point in the game in Risk. I mean, early on, you're trying to secure a more isolated South America or Africa, or obviously the most isolated Australia, right? The most protected. And there's a certain point in the game where you need to expand and you're going to go for more, whether that's, going from South America to Africa, or I'm going to try and take over Europe, or try and take over Asia, or try and take over multiple continents that are much more difficult to keep.
Hold on to.
Yeah, to hold on to. And if you make that decision too early, then you're just going to get burned. But if you wait too long, then you also are too weak to ever do anything about it when somebody else does it.
Yeah, and I love that about it as well. I think that there's a lot of decisions to be made in it. But I think that overall, as a game, for me, there are much better games now that will do this better.
Absolutely.
That I'll play 10 times out of 10, right?
That's what I was going to say. Are you guys still interested in playing this game now? Because I don't have any experience with Risk. I've maybe played it one time, and that's it.
Well, then I something that you so guys... 9 times out of 10, because now I would play a game of Risk if you have never played. Absolutely.
So okay. My brother and I would play this before church on Sunday mornings. And I loved playing it. It was awesome. For back then, it was great. Now,
how did you get a game in before?
Sometimes we had afternoon church. So.
Okay.
I do have to say, I would not be excited about playing regular old vanilla Risk. I would love to play Risk Legacy at some point.
Yeah.
And I do love the Lord of the Rings themed Risk.
I have a copy of that, but I've never played it.
I have it. The first time I played it with my neighbor 20 years ago or 15 years ago in California, we were playing the game and he slaps down the card. I had Mordor sealed off, right? And he slaps down this card. I had not seen any of the cards in the deck, and it was the Tunnel Under the Mountain card. And he totally got the ring into Mordor, and there was no way he was going to win had that card not existed. And it kind of ticked me off because there was no effort on his part to let me know that such a thing existed before the game started, right?
OP.
Yeah, just a little bit. And if I would have known it was there, I could have planned for it, right? But whatever, we don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, so that is my number 2, Risk.
Number one for me is Acquire, and I'm talking 1968 version Acquire. I'm not talking the Avalon Hill, or I think Hasbro might even have done versions after that, but 1968 version of Acquire. My parents were gifted this when shortly after they were married. They played it, uh, when they were newlyweds, and as they started to have kids. Acquire is very divisive in my family. There are three people who, when they're around, you hide your copy of Acquire so it doesn't get burned. And then there's three of, myself and two of my siblings who absolutely love this game. Acquire, is a game of high finance. I mean, we're talking buying and selling of stocks of hotels, merging hotels, trying to grow your hotels and then sell off and make huge profits. I loved playing this as a kid from a very young age. I enjoyed math, and there's tons of math in it, but I loved feeling like I was, playing this. It's not a kid's game, right? But I played it at a very young age with my parents, with some of my siblings, and it made me feel, hey, I can hang with my adult parents playing this game. I have so many experiences and memories of playing this on vacation, and it's just, I love everything about it. Even in games, I think one of the biggest negatives about Acquire is that when you play a game, I mean, there's two. If you run out of money, but you got to be smart enough not to run out of money. But the second one is when you're drawing tiles and you cannot draw a tile that will benefit you, that will allow you to create a hotel or merge a hotel. That's very frustrating, but I loved even those games because then it's like, all right, the life dealt me a crappy hand. I'm going to do whatever I can to still have an awesome score in this game. And many times was able to do that, and just such a good experience. I love this game. It's funny when we have family reunions, we get this game out and people start rolling their eyes and people are frothing at the mouth to play. So I love this game, and even though I wouldn't say that it's aged well, and I can't stand the newer versions of it. Give me Continental, American Worldwide Tower Festival, and Continental are my go-to favorite hotel chains, and you really can't go wrong with those two. Have you guys played Acquire at all? We've played.
I've played many a game of Acquire in my time. I have a very similar experience to you in that, like, it was a very family game, and in fact, my wife's family big into Acquire as well, and they don't play board games, but they play Acquire, and this is the game that they play. And I was on the side that I was not smart enough to not lose all my money. And yes, many a times I've spent all of my money. I was not the smartest one in this game. Most of the time my older brother was, and like he would like math this out so perfectly. And that was one of the things for me that was difficult early on. And it was one of the more thinky games that I had ever played up to that point. And I had so many issues. I was like, I don't want to play this game because my brothers are smarter than me at this. And I can't figure out the math behind it. But then I started realizing how to play more and more. And I was like, this game is genius. And I think that Sid Sackson, the designer, designing it back in 1968, as well as all of his other games, he's got a number of games. He was light years ahead of his time as far as game designers go. And I think that this game, I am going to contradict you a little bit. I think this game holds water to today, and you can play this game and get, like, it's comparable in a lot of ways to me to some of the other types of games that we're playing on regular. I do think that there are some flaws and things that can be fixed, but yeah, like you, that original version is the version that I've played on most, and I bar none, it's the best.
And I think there might actually be earlier versions. I said 68. I went and found, like, I mean, there are some Acquire nerds out there, right? But I found documentation on the versions by year, and looking at the image, the one that we had and the ones that I have I have 2 copies in my house because this game's so awesome, was the 1968 version. and while you were talking, I was thinking of a couple other things that I love while playing this game. One, it taught me to count cards, right? And I don't say that I do that playing poker because I don't make an effort to do that, right? But it taught me to keep track of who has what stock. There's there's 7 different types of hotels, 7 different types of stock, and trying to keep track of what each player has.
So who has the majorities of them and where that is.
And which ones you can sneak in and steal as you notice that they're running out of money, and try to maximize the bonuses that you get from selling the hotels. And one of the most exciting moments in the game for me is when you get tiles and it's like, okay, this tile will let me start a hotel, and on my next turn I can merge it. And if nobody buys that stock, I get both bonuses. And just the anticipation of it going around the table, nobody, my sister doesn't buy it, my dad doesn't buy it, my mom doesn't buy it. It comes back to me. It's like, booyah. It's like a drop the mic moment. Like, you guys all stink because I just got both bonuses.
Well, it's a game where you're playing the players as much as you're playing the game, which is really cool about it because you mentioned poker. It has some vibes to poker in that regard, and that you have to, and that was some of my early on mistakes with playing this game, was that there was not enough me understanding what is it you're doing, Tyler? Why am I can't play this game in isolation. I can't just focus on my stuff and what's happening on that board. I have to be thinking exactly what's in everybody's hands. And then I have to be making sure that I'm buying at the right time, selling at the right time, holding on to those tile pieces for the opportune moments. Because there are some that you're like, okay, this one's going to come into play and it's going to be super valuable. But when do I play that? That's important.
Yeah.
Well, hearing you guys talk about this makes me want to play.
Let's do it.
But maybe not with you guys. Because I mean, I've never played this one.
Tyler's only ever beaten
right?
me at this game. Like
we played it last year's retreat, right?
We've played it a couple
of times. I remember you
times.
guys playing that at the retreat last year.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think
it's not the prettiest game to look at.
It's not. It's
No.
got this muky yellow board.
Production value is not quite up to, let's say,
probably looking like,
something like
yeah,
that.
no, it looks like it's probably eking out all sorts of hazardous chemical material and stuff. So.
Well, I mean, it was back from the 60s, so hopefully all that content's gone.
Right, it's met its shelf life.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, I mean, this game acquires it is the number one reason why I love board games, and it fueled that love from a very young age, and I will play Acquire any day of the week. And I do think you're right. It does hold out well. It does have some issues with it, but it's a great game to put on the table. So that's my number one, Acquire.
All right. Well, my number one is Dominion. So I started logging games through Board Game Geek in about 2009. And for some strange reason, I took 2 years off between 2009 and today, which I'm kicking myself for doing.
I was going to say, does that hurt?
Oh, it hurts. Yeah, it hurts a lot. I don't know why I did that, but I have every game I've ever played, except for those 2 years, logged from 2009. And I have over 300 logged games of Dominion. We just played that game to death, and we loved it. So we played when it initially came out. We played the base game, and then every expansion that would come out, and there's been, I think, 10 expansions to this point. It would just be such an exciting experience to get the expansion, to get the cards. This is the first game I ever sleeved cards for, right? And that's a slippery slope because now I sleeve almost every game I have.
You have to.
I mean, right, you have to, right? But we would sleeve the cards. It was almost like, we'd get the game and everybody would get around the table. We'd open the box. You'd look at the cards. You'd smell the game because, who doesn't like new game smell?
Oh, yeah.
And you would go through and you'd sleeve all the cards. You'd look at the card like, man, this is cool. I want to play with this card. And then you'd sleeve the other cards. Oh, this one's cool too. I want to play with this. And then immediately we would start the game. And we would play 3 or 4 games until we got through every card in the set. And it was just such a cool experience. And as you get more and more sets, more and more combinations, and there's an infinite number of combinations now of cards you can play with. And even today, I'm finding combos that I didn't even know existed, right? You play this card and then it combos with this card and then you can draw this card off the top of your deck and do stuff like that. And just that experience is a fun experience. And we've played Dominion so many times. It's the only game in my collection that I've had to re-sleeve the cards. So
awesome.
I wore out the sleeves for the cards and I had to put new ones on, because when you're going through the deck, you have new expansions that the cards are, sleeves are pristine. And then you have the starter cards like the estates and the gold and stuff like that get beat up. So you're like, I know what that card is. This is a new card, or or it's gold, or it's copper or something. So I had to, go through and
Resleeving for you, for those listening who do not know this, is a big deal because Kevin sleeves all of his games with the highest quality sleeves you can get out there. Like, he stockpiles sleeves and stuff like that for that purpose. And
it's therapeutic to sleeve your games.
yeah, but
is
a lot of work. I have like a couple of my games sleeved, and I'm not a big sleever, but I've never had to re-sleeve anything. I have like one game, and it's actually the next game I'm talking about, but that I would have liked to have sleeved because I've ruined all the cards and stuff. I'm glad that you actually have a game that you could justify.
It paid off.
Yeah.
Sure. And it will pay off for every other game I have as well.
I mean, honestly, when I get a new game, the first thing I do, I'll punch it, obviously, but I sleeve the cards, and then I'll put it back in the box, and it'll go back on the shelf. And then at some point, I'll get around to reading the rules, right? But that sitting down with a football game on or hockey game, watching a show, whatever, and just checking out the cards, sleeving them, that's therapeutic. I love that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Dominion's a great game. I think I've only played once in the last 5 or 6 years, but I had a lot of fun. I've heard is there a new app for it that's come out?
There's always a bunch of new apps. I
know
think there was a more
an unofficial
recent one. Yeah.
for a while on the App Store, but
no, there is an app out there. I haven't kept up with the digital versions because I think they've kind of botched some of the digital version releases. But there's other apps like companion apps where they randomize different cards based on the set that we have, which makes setup a little bit easier. But
I think that Dominion, as far as a deck builder goes, I love the concept behind Dominion and what it has brought to the table for the hobby board game space. And it is the father of deck builders, right? And I also think that the design team on it, if I remember correctly, were Magic the Gathering, like high competitors in the tournament scene of Magic the Gathering, and decided that they wanted to create a game. And if I'm completely wrong on this, somebody can correct me.
Gift card.
Yeah. To the first person to point it out. Is that what you're trying to say? No, but if I remember correctly, they saw this and loved the whole drafting of Magic the Gathering and making a deck and constructing and crafting that deck. And so they wanted to get that experience in a board game space where that's kind of the focus.
And the whole game is the deck building aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my number 2. My number 1. Dominion.
That's embarrassing. You don't know what your number 1 is.
Yeah, I called my number 3, my number 4.
Yeah, but this is the number
times.
1.
My number 12.
All right, so my number 1 is The Resistance. And yes, we've been talking this whole time about games that are backstabby, a little bit of a kind of betrayal type of stuff for me. And this was one that's definitely got that in this. So The Resistance, what The Resistance is it's an experience for me personally that shaped a lot of what I did. When I first started playing this game, I believe I was gifted this game. And it was before I had really started collecting almost any game. And I was gifted a copy of this game. And it was the version that comes with the Plot Thickens expansion already built into it. I didn't actually know that was an expansion because I just always played with it when I first started playing with it. And I don't think I would like this game or would have liked this game nearly as much as I did if that expansion hadn't been built into it already. But The Resistance is a social deduction game where you're trying to discover who the spies are and who the resistance is. So you are on one of those two teams and trying to figure out who can you trust And you don't know at the table anybody you can trust. And that experience to me is one of my favorite because it creates so many different experiences that make the game really interesting. Now, the biggest criticism about the Resistance is you have to know how to lie, right? Or because if you're not able to lie, you get uncomfortable. But I really learned how to lie with this game and make it feel like very believable. I remember there was one game of this that I was playing with my brother, and for the most part, I'm not somebody who quickly gets to anger. I get angry sometimes, but my siblings know that I try not to, and so I knew that about my brother, and so I put up this scene that you guys are cheating and like all this stuff. Like I started like pulling out all the stops and like working up this emotional tantrum, as it were, to like be like, how can you trust him? He's the betrayer. Why would you ever do this? And I just kind of worked myself up while playing with my brother, and he started almost crying is what it looked like to me. And he's like, geez, Tyson is not the spy. He would not act like this if he were actually the spy. Like this is real, guys. And I was playing with like my best friend and some really close family members at that time, and everybody was convinced. And I had this moment that I got to see. I got to take and like make them believe that, and then just flip it on their heads and then like betray them outright. And that was such a satisfying moment for me, even though like it was because like I said earlier in my list, when I'm playing a game, and I try to establish this when I play these styles of games up front, I try to establish that, hey, this is just a game. Whatever happens in the game stays in the game. So I try and give people that understanding.
I'm only a pathological liar in a game.
Yeah.
I'm only a jerk.
It's okay to be a sociopath if you're playing a board game.
So what was their response when you revealed?
They freaked out, and they
freaked out in a good way.
They were like, I can't believe that. Like
I didn't understand the side of you
with that. Yeah, they were okay with it, which was probably why it was a better experience. But I started playing this game, and similar to Kevin and Dominion, I've played probably around 100 games of this, maybe more. There was times in college that I was playing this every night, 3, 4, 5 times in a night with the same group, and we would play this over and over and over again. And it was just a really amazing time in my board gaming development as a board gamer, and I really enjoyed it. And it got to the point where I play these games, and the people I would play with, if we ever introduced somebody to this game and they hadn't played it before, they would always say, all right, there's one thing you need to know about this game. The number one rule is never trust Tyson. Like, no matter what, whether or not he's the good guy or the bad guy, never trust Tyson. To the point that made it so satisfying for me, because I had to get to a state in which I could overcome that obstacle where they had to figure out how to trust me when they were already told not to. So they came to the game already doing that. And that was some of the most satisfying moments in gaming that I've had. I haven't played a social deduction game in a year or two at least. So it's been a while since I've played this. I don't think that I could handle playing this the way that I played it back then. But as far as shaping me as a gamer, this game was quintessential in my evolution.
This game's pretty group dependent, though, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have the right group, then it really shines. But if it's not the right group, then it kind of falls on its face a little bit, right?
But I think that's why the plot thickens was so important. Because if you haven't played with the plot thickened cards, it enables people who can't lie to be able to have excuses and do things beyond that. That was one of the big things about other social deduction games that I had played up to that point that weren't great, is that they were group dependent, Werewolf being one of those, or Mafia, where those games had a lot of contingency upon you have to be able to interact socially well. There is no like crutch that you can lie back on. But the plot thickens, what it does is it enables players to be able to have outs, and you don't even have to be able to lie in that to be able to get there. So I would always recommend, if you're going to play it, play with the plot thickens. Otherwise, yes, it's very group dependent. And any social deduction game, regardless, I think is going to be group dependent. So that's my number one, The Resistance.
All right, that completes the top 5 games that most influenced us as gamers. We hope you enjoyed this intro episode. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, this was recorded back in September, and we apologize for some of the audio quality. If you enjoy our podcast, please follow and subscribe. We've got an Anachrony feature review coming your way in episode 7. Check us out on Instagram. Check out our BGG Guild, Guild 3947. We also have a blog on Board Game Geek. Until next time, and thank you for listening. Totsiens. You know, more difficult.
All of those work. I'll take
Difficulter.
Yeah, that's the one.
More difficulter.
Words are hard.
Yes.
Now,
It's just kind of a big.
Yeah, things we learned from the first podcast.
Yeah.
Tyson's
Niche.
We're going to find our niche. What is the word?
we're going to find something. We don't know what we're going to find. We're going to find it, and hopefully
it's good.
Hopefully it's entertaining, right? Yeah.